Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us today. Welcome to this special webinar hosted by Dualchas Architects. I'm very pleased to introduce today's hosts, Neil, Stephen, and Rory Flynn. Thank you both for joining the webinar. Hello.
Yep.
So, Neil Stephen is the co-founder and managing director of Dualchas Architects. He started Dualchas in the mid-90s with his twin brother, Alistair Stephen, who is the managing director of our sister company, Heb Homes. And joining him today is Rory Flynn, who's an architect and has worked with Dualchas since 2011 and became a director in 2018. So most of you will already know all about Dualchas, but for those that don't, Dualchas are an award-winning rural architectural practice with studios in Skye and Glasgow, recognised for creating contemporary homes that are deeply rooted in landscape, heritage and place. The work combines modern architectural thinking with a strong sensitivity to materials, setting, craftsmanship and the way people genuinely want to live. So today's session is called From Concept to Completion, and we will explore the journey of creating a bespoke home from the earliest ideas and understanding of context through to design development, detailing, construction, and ultimately the finished home itself. We'll also be looking at a selection of example projects along the way. So importantly, Neil and Rory both have first-hand experience of designing and building their own homes on the Isle of Skye. They're both sitting in their own homes today, so you can get a little glimpse of where they live and what they designed for themselves and their families. So it means that they can bring a particular authentic understanding of creating homes within a unique landscape and context of a rural location for their families. So for anyone unable to stay for the full session, or if you'd like to revisit the discussion afterwards, the webinar is being recorded. All your cameras and mics are off for now. And if all registered attendees will receive a link automatically as well for the recording. Feel free to submit questions throughout the conversation. So if you've got anything you want to ask, drop it into the chat and we'll address the questions at the end of the session. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Neil and Rory.
Thanks, Fraser. Rudy, I think you're gonna kick off, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm going to kick off. Yes, thanks everybody for joining us. I'm Rory Flynn, director at Dualchas, and we're going to be talking today about from concept to completion. So this is the idea that you follow through a very strong idea that you develop at the start, and you still have that idea. It's strong enough to hold through to the end of a project and the delivery of it. We are based in South Skye and Glasgow. Both Neil and I are in South Skye today at our own houses. We use our basis to work across the whole of Scotland. We're inspired by context, landscape, our cultural heritage, our built heritage, and we work in incredible landscapes and we try to respect, understand and be inspired by them. Today we're going to be looking at understanding context, the initial idea and the diagram, articulating the ideas and following them through, the joy of detail, and the delivery of projects, the all-important one. So firstly, Neil is going to talk about Achnacoich.
Yes, thank you, Rudy. No, Achnacoich, this is a house that I did with my wife, Laura, who's also an architect. And there's a great risk in a marriage of two architects trying to design a house together. And I'm happy to say we're both still married. But I must say it was, the process is quite difficult because you're trying to get to a place which will be a family home that you both love, and you also have to try and manage a budget, which is obviously a hard thing. So we found this site. It's in Achnacoich in Slate in Skye, and what was key about the site was there's quite a lot of land with it. And my wife Laura is into horses, but she's from a family of vets. Both her parents are vets, and she loves sheep and. We've got pigs outside now, lots of dogs. It's not something I grew up with, but I'm starting to get used to it. So there's the sites. There's 7 acres of pretty good agricultural land, which is quite rare in Slate. And it's also facing onto a beautiful beach and a view out to Coolins. And it's a crofting community. And when you've got an open field, you have to think, well, where do I start? What's the idea? And I think when you're designing as an architect, you want to have constraints to work against, because when you're working against something, ideas follow. The hardest thing for an architect is just to have a completely flat field with no context. You want to start thinking, well, how do I design against this, and how do I respect it? So you're thinking about the existing landform, you're looking at existing buildings, you're looking at the winds, you're looking at the sun. So yeah, if we go to that next slide, when we bought the site, there was planning consent in principle for a house located here, which is not where we built. And the reason we didn't want to build where planning principle was located was because we felt this building wouldn't have a relationship with Gillen House, which we felt was important. And it didn't, and it just sort of felt as if it was plonked on top of a hill, and it would have great views, but we wanted to do something that was tied in more with the existing walls and felt as if it could be an outbuildings to the large White House, which is Gillen House. So this is our diagram. If you look at that, it looks very simple, but there's a stone wall there. You'll see the dotted lines, and that's our house that's opposite it. Now that wall is 25 metres long, and so we decided to make our house 25 metres long. And that sounds slightly arbitrary, but actually worked out okay. And it gave us what will become at the moment it's a football pitch for our 7-year-old, but it will become a garden, a sort of walled garden that's enclosed by those dimensions. And that was our idea about where to place the building in terms of trying to create some sort of context, but also had to have a buyer and also another outbuilding which should be holiday let. So if we move on to the next slide, if we move on to the next slide, there's the house, there's the guest accommodation, there's the buyer. So the house itself, it's a longhouse with 2 equal forms, and our idea in the way this was planned, which was to follow through, was we knew there was this lovely view looking out over the sea, and the previous planning consent was saying, let's do a wall of glass facing out to sea. We wanted to create a sense, our idea was to create a sense of reveal. So you go through a journey through the house, so you go into a small entrance lobby with utility off to one side with a lower space. You go through into a larger hallway with storage, and as you walk through the building, you get a tantalizing glimpse up. That there's a window to the view up, but you don't quite see it as you come in. Instead, you're getting these tall windows facing out onto what will be to the garden, or as it is just now out here, a football pitch. So it's a really simple idea, but it was trying to articulate it in plan. I mean, Laura's one of Laura's strong ideas was, I don't want this as a sort of what would look like a standard Heb home or a standard Dualchas house, which would potentially have been a lot cheaper for us, I think. But she wanted it to be a building that's really bedded in the ground, that's built of clay block and had a real solidity to it. So and there was to be no paints, to be no plasterboards, to minimise membranes, just to make it a very natural building. And so the clear articulation of those materials also had to be clearly articulated in the plan, so we could actually deliver that when it came to it. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see the section. It's a very, very simple forms. Now, all because something is a simple form doesn't mean to say that the building is simple, because trying to deliver those forms required a bit of thought and skill, because you'll see there's no, in the roof there's no ridge beam, visible ridge beam. But it gives us that really, really clean space that you can maybe just see above me here. And so that was one of the things that we wanted to achieve. And maybe we can show it in the next slides how it's done. So yep, so there you are from externally. So there's something beeping, I'm not sure what it is. Externally, we have these very simple roof forms, and we did think in the landscape when you approach this building that having these simple pitch roofs all facing each other kind of reflecting the jagged nature of the coolness behind it, actually would soften it in the landscape a bit, because if it was just one big form sitting across the landscape with a horizontal line as you approached, it would kind of jar against the hills. So you're thinking about the context of not just how the building works, but how it would actually look in the landscape in these simple forms. So if we move on to the next slides, Rudy. So you'll see there, it's very simple and it's tucked away, and it's got that relationship with the stone wall on the right. Let's say it's the exact length of that wall, and that's a sort of walled garden of Gillen House with a very, very simple elevation and timber on the roof and the walls. And that's the interior. So delivering that sort of simple articulation of the materials. So you've got a CLT roof with no ridge beam. So that a temporary ridge beam was put in place to support the CLT, glued and held with steel brackets. And then once that was secure, taken away, and you've got that really clean form. All the timber, all the plaster, really clearly articulated. And there's also the terrazzo floor, which is using local stone from a local quarry. And so to get that clear articulation, it gives you a calm feel. And what's lovely about it, the fact we've got this natural clay plaster walls and the timber from the low northwest sun comes in, it glows like a honeycomb. I mean, it's got a real warmth to it, and there's no paints, no plasterboards, and a very healthy environment for our kids, we hope. Although our 2-year-old licks the clay wall, I think, to get minerals, and the dogs have been eating it. So it's like Hansel and Gretel house. It's so good you can literally eat it. So there you are. You can't say that about every home. Has somebody tried to eat your home yet, Rudy? Possibly not.
Not yet. Put it on the
No,
agenda.
not competition. I'll bring my dogs round. They'll give it a go. And there's Bozzy, one of the main offenders in the background there. So yeah, and there's that tantalising view I was talking about. So I say not the sheep and Laura, but of the Coolins. So we held that view back, and as you come up, that view is only revealed as you move through the house, the journey through the house, and I think that's a good approach. Quite often, architecture, when you're approaching it, it's not about showing everything. If you've got a great view, not every room has to have it. Sometimes the intimate view is actually just as interesting as the long view, but you have to think it through. And so this building was inspired by just a wall, and that's how it ended up. And it could have ended up in many different ways, but having an initial idea and trying to follow it through, I think, is what we're here to talk about. And I think that's hopefully has worked with this house. Rudy, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Neil. And the next project also involves a wall as a major player. This is at Kulnakroch, which is a small settlement in Staffen on the Trotternish Peninsula in the north of Skye. It has an outlook up the west coast from Gairloch up to Assynt. The main road that winds up the eastern side of Trotternish can be seen here, and the site, which sits in a crofting settlement, has a single house on at the moment and a shed in the corner of the field. The brief for this project was to make a small unit that could be rented, but would be subservient to the house. So the idea was to preserve the views of the house and keep it over to the side, out of the view. Now the most down in the corner of the site there, there's two incredible views. Really, one is out to Brothers Point to the right, and the view of the distant west coast of the mainland, and the other is in the foreground is this beautiful stone wall which runs up to the horizon, which is the separation between crofts, but as has happened all over the Skye, the walls degraded over time, have collapsed partly into the landscape, but still form a strong threshold between properties. So this was because we were moving the building down into the corner to be away from the main house. This was the immediate context for the building and something that we wanted to work with. So this shows the break in the wall, which allows the roads to come into the site, and this is the existing house. At the moment, there's an existing shed in the corner here, and the idea was to build a new structure right in against that wall and rebuild the section of the wall that runs through the site that the client is in control of. So this shows the break in the wall and the new building here and the existing building. The idea really was to work with 3 new walls and 1 existing wall. So a new stone wall hides the building from the houses around and the house on the site, and then a new timber wall forms storage and kitchen and a warm lining to the interior, and a new glazed wall sits on the existing stone wall, the restored section of the existing stone wall, and gives a clear outlook to the horizon, to Brothers Point, and also up the existing stone wall. So there's a very strong relationship between the walls. The clients were able to purchase a piece of land on the other side of the wall, which meant we could glaze right up to the perceived boundary. And it's a very, very simple plan, which allows a very sheltered entrance, a private bedroom and shower, and then an open plan room, which opens out into the landscape. And it was that strong idea that was followed through on site. You can see that the restoration of the existing stone wall and the small break in it for the gate, and the new stone wall in exactly the same stone, sourced locally, which encloses the building and forms a protective wall, with a traditional earth capping to it, which was managed to be cut from the existing land, which gives it a different character to the flat-roofed timber roof. And the glazed wall, you can just see a hint of the landscape beyond through that room. So very, very solid at the back and very open to the landscape at the front. And you can see just where the stone wall has been restored, built back up again within the site. And the new triple glazing sits carefully on that, forming a sill to the new warm interior. And that really illustrates the first idea from the first site visit of restoring this wall, of being able to look along it and feel connected to the landscape and the history of the place. And there, with the existing house behind, you can see how the building sits very carefully and very quietly within the landscape. And another building based around walls is Orstedding, which Neil will take us through.
I'll take on this one, Rory. So yeah, Orstedding. This is a project that came to us a long time ago, and with a previous client. And yeah, so there it's not far from my house. It's just along the coast. It's about 15 minutes in the car. The beautiful coastline around here. So there's Ord. It's a lovely little settlement in slate. Looks out towards Blavin and the Coolin Ridge, and you can see there where the wee arrow is that was the old steading before it collapsed, before we got hold of it. But when the thought was, I mean, this was maybe at least 10, maybe 15 years ago. It was to try and restore it, create a house. But the difficulty with restoring it and creating a house is that you don't get the view. When you're up high above the wall, you've actually got an amazing view of the Coolins. And it's like, how do you build this up, or how would you build this up to actually give the spaces that you need and also get the view? I mean, it's actually quite difficult because the internal spaces of the existing ruin are very narrow. About, once you insulate it, you probably only got just about 4 meters. So it's not really, it's a difficult project, but it's a cool building, and you can see the character of it is, we found really interesting, was all of this was done by crofters over the years, or whoever was looking after it. A lot of the stone walls been repaired with bits of concrete and cement. There's trees growing at the wall head, as you can see. You've got that beautiful rusty iron, which is extremely degraded, but there's something beautiful about it, and the rust has stained the stonework as well. So you've got a real patchwork of vegetation, of concrete, of rust, bits of faded timber. And so what we wanted to do was sort of try and retain a lot of those elements as to how do you do something with this, but actually make something special. Now, I think we've got a diagram. Now, this is where we ended up. Now, to be honest, and I'll embarrass both myself and Rudy here, I've been working on this project for a while, sticking with the idea of trying to renovate the ruin with my for my clients, for my new clients who came along not so long ago. So it's the previous owner sold it, and my new clients got it many years later. And I showed it to Rudy. He thought it was good, and then I showed it to Laura, who designed this house with me, and she said to me, "Neil, what you're describing is a brief, it's not an idea." And I went, "Right, okay." And she said, being the clever one in the family, said, "Why don't you think of the ruin as a fragment that you retain, and you place a building at the rear of the site, and you create beautiful spaces. You create a courtyard garden at the front and intimate spaces at the back, and then you can do something 2-story and you actually get a view over the wall." And my response to that was, "That's a great idea. Why didn't I think of that?" But it was a great idea. And I think, and as soon as we had that idea, Laura came up with that idea and convinced the rest of us this is the right approach. It was really exciting to follow it through. Now, one of the key things in architecture when you're doing a project, and I always say this to clients, the most important part of the project is the initial design, the initial idea, because if you get it wrong and you keep going with it, whether you're doing planning or warrant drawings, but you're still not quite sure about it, then it's a lot of hard work and a lot of effort for something you're not convinced by. And I think if you can get a strong idea and follow it through, it's a much more enjoyable process for both the architect and the client, because architecture should be good fun. These sort of projects should be great fun if they go well. So that was existing ruin, and that elevation here, which is the sort of approach elevation that's come down the road, we wanted just to retain that, but to place a building here, we'd have to just take away some of the. I mean, by this point, the roof had collapsed in this building. By the time we came back to it, there's just fragments of rusty sheeting lying down. So it wasn't really. It was more like a fragment of walls. You've got stone walls, perimeter walls around here, but we thought we'll just take away an element of stone here and locate the building at the back, as Laura had suggested in her idea. So the next slide should show how we approached it. So, just to describe, see, we've retained that elevation, put in a shed here, created parking here. So you come in the existing opening. There's an existing window there, which is the foot of a stairs, where you go up some steps to an elevated platform. We can get a view out over what will become a courtyard garden. Below the platform, we actually contained some of the drainage system, because it's a very tight site. When you come round this existing wall, there you approach the entrance, but you do not see this garden as you come in, approach the courtyard garden. And you come into a building, again, to a low space. There's a bench, there's a bit of glass, which looks through, again, the existing opening, where they'll be planting, to create an intimate sort of view. And then through into the space where this is where you get a view to the courtyard, and also an intimate view to what will be a fern garden at the back. And again, we're working with a landscape designer in this called Harris Bugg, who Charlotte has got a house in Skye, and she's one of the judges at Chelsea this year, or has been, and one of Britain's top garden designers. And this garden will be completed this summer, as I'll show you. So that's a very simple idea, but then Staircase, so it'll continue. On the ground floor, you've got a shower room with a wall of glass that looks onto a stone wall, again creating an incredibly intimate view of an existing, interesting stone wall of ferns and rust and concrete. And the bedrooms will look out into a fern garden, which is to the east, will be a dark, dank space, but will have incredible verdant growth of greenery, both in the walls and in the planting. So the base is almost, it feels almost subterranean, and that would be expressed within the materials. And then you go up some steps to something that's much more light filled. And so you come up the stairs, you get a view to the rear, which is the trees. Come round, and there is your view out over the courtyard garden down below you, which will be pretty stunning. And then over the wall and a view to the Coollands beyond and across the water. And the master bedroom, again, not every room has to have the same view. So the master bedroom looks out into this fragment of stone, of the stone steading. There's a bit of art that's going to go in here from the clients, but you're up in amongst the sort of birch tree canopies in here, and it's really a sort of special feeling, very, very different to the view at the front. And that's kind of the section explains it. In the bedroom, you've got that intimate view to an existing sort of ruined stone wall, a view out from here to what will be a courtyard garden, and you upstairs, a view to the trees at the back, and to the front, a view out over the wall, the street to the front, and a view out to the coast. So a very simple idea. So this is a visualization that the garden designer did based on our design. So you can see the idea of the garden. It's almost like we're creating a secret garden. So we're closing this wall off, the garden off. And so this is like, when you come through, it's like it'll be an astonishing surprise. So it'll be like everything around that part of Ord, it's standard like birch and alder and trees, but the garden we wanted to feel, a burst of colour and something really special and intimate. That would be a real surprise, and people would want to come and see it just to see the garden. So that was the image of how we managed it looking. So that's the stage it's at just now with the corten steel. So the corten steel, the sort of the rusty iron reflects what was there before of the metal. The stone wall here still to be finished to sort of close this off, which will happen this summer. But there'll be that garden will be created within the fragments of this ruin. So you can see we've tidied up the wall head, but we've basically left it as it is, even with bits of trees growing out of it. We just, as long as it's structurally stable, our thought was let's leave it as a fragment. So all this will be tidied up and cleaned up and planted. There'll be lots of planting on the outside of the building as well as within the outside of the wall, as well as within the courtyard. So it should really be transformed, and we're not going to get it properly photographed until that's all done and it's bedded in. And I think there's some views of the interior. So this was the idea of creating these intimate subterranean feel to the spaces. So we've got a very dark plaster on the walls. So the bedrooms feel dark. You've got that east light. You've got the light coming through the sort of mature birch trees at the back. And then you've got all these beautiful ferns that are naturally embedded within the wall. And then when the fern garden is planted, it will be an absolute burst of deep green at the back of the building. And upstairs, it's much more light filled. So you go from a dark green plaster to an oak fill, a warm oak room with simple palette of materials. And then you can see that to the left, you've got these views out to the fragments of the wall and the birch forest at the back, which is really the intimacy of it, and the fact it's mature and you're working with something existing feels really special. And to the front, I think there's a photograph that shows, that was a really cloudy day, and just after Storm Amy, you can see the windows are absolutely manky, and the leaves have been burnt with the salt water that was blown up so that's actually in summer last year. But there's an amazing view just over that canopy of trees at the front. There's an amazing view of the Coollands. You'll have to trust me on it. But you can see over the wall at the front, whereas previously trying to do a building here, you couldn't see over that wall and you couldn't actually really touch it. You couldn't start knocking holes in it. So it was a simple idea, and it's been carried through, and the clients love it. But we'll show you again once the garden's finished.
Thanks, Neil. Yeah, so the next project is on the Isle of Bryar. Everything we've shown you so far has been on the Isle of Skye, but we do work further afield, and we do like to apply the methods and passions that we have to other contexts. We're really keen to take what we do and work in other landscapes and try to understand those and work carefully with them. So the Isle of Bryar is in the Scilly Isles. It's one of the 5 inhabited isles of the Scilly Isles, which sits about 40 miles off Land's End, away out into the Atlantic. It has one, it is an archipelago, a bay, which has the inhabited islands in it with one further outlier. St. Mary's is the main island. Tresco is the second biggest island, which has an abbey and spectacular gardens, and one of the main tourist attractions of the Scilly Isles. But our island is Bryar, which is the smallest of the inhabited islands, a permanent population of about 65 people. So little boats jet between all of these islands in the day, connecting the community up. There's an airport on St. Mary's. There's a heliport on Tresco, and we have travelled in all forms to Bryar over the years. This was a project. It was a 3-phase project, 3 different buildings that we did in a group, some small and one larger. So we worked over the course of about 3 years on site for those 3 projects. So yeah, this is showing one of the helicopter trips where you land on Tresco and then take a small jet boat over to Bryar. It has a very beautiful landscapes. At one point, you would say it is familiar and Hebridean in some parts of the island, and in others, really the flora of the island is very different. It has a very different climate. There are a lot of small flowers, almost like alpine flowers, growing in the rocks. It was a very exciting landscape to work in. It was both familiar and new. But it has a very rich history of stone building and timber, more modern timber structures in between. It's largely a granite island, so it has granite walls and small timber outbuildings. We were on the west side of Bryar, in Hell Bay. The beach, Great Par, is at the bottom of the site. This is the Hell Bay Hotel, which is the biggest development and employer on the island, which was built about 20 years ago, but fits in quite well as a collection of buildings rather than one large hotel. The building that we have is here seen on a historical plan in the Great Par Bay. It was the dairy of the island originally, but you can see there are subdivisions of the garden ground and a long stone outbuilding, which still exists at the bottom of the building, at the bottom of the site, and a boathouse. Many of the houses and communities had boathouses that opened directly out onto the bays. And this building, which is a view from Great Par to this building out to the side, is the most westerly building in England. And this is a set of photos of the building that we worked with in Bryar. So this is the rear of the house, which sits on the path that runs round the island. There's only a small number of cars and tractors on the island. Most people go by foot or by a small quad bike. They pick you up from the beach if you're staying at the hotel in a small minivan that drives between the rocks on the beach. But other than that, it's just a small pedestrian track that runs the circumference of the island. So this is a neighbouring house. This is the house that we were asked to look at. It had been originally a dairy, then it had been converted into a house, and then over time it had become quite a large B&B, had 5 bedrooms for rent and another 2 bedrooms for the owners. But the original granite building, which you see the rear elevation of onto the street, is lost within this, within all the extensions and the renders and the new UPVC windows that have been placed all over the building. So what had originally started as a small building had been changed completely in character with a gable facing out to the sea. But we tried to look for clues of what would work, what we were looking to preserve, bring to the forefront, and what we were going to work with in terms of character. So this is a small boathouse down at the bottom of the site that faces the bay. It was falling down, but it had a very charming relationship to the hedges that surround the garden ground. This is the existing building at the bottom of the site, which is now a holiday rental. That wasn't part of the brief, but it also had a very strong gable. And really looking at this gable here, which had originally been very simple in granite, and this long granite wall, which retains its original character, were really the clues of what we wanted to work with. So very early in the process, in fact, on the first visit, we sat and made this sketch of how we wanted the building to come together, how we wanted to restore the existing granite gable with 2 small original openings. We wanted to make a new extension which had all the living areas which sat within the garden, that was related to the height of the hedge, and was a timber building related to the timber outbuildings that you see, and then to link these together with a main door which is in a glazed link, which gives you a transition space between the inside and the outside, and between the old and the new structures. So this is a granite building, this is a timber building, and the timber link in this glazed link in between. And it gently steps down the hillside with the other buildings. So this diagram shows the confluence of paths which this is our site here. It faces onto this little junction here, where they have 3 very strong stone gables of the existing buildings, but our gable was hidden behind the render and compromised by this large gable section that came out. So we wanted to restore that, so there was a family of 4 gables facing onto this courtyard, and this was the diagram that really informed what we did. So these are the granite buildings, and then these are the timber buildings that sit within the garden ground. And this really illustrates what we wanted to take away. The instinct was to take everything away that wasn't part of the original form, to strip that building back to its stone walls, to hollow it out, and to rebuild it with more cellular rooms. So the idea was that we would have the bedrooms and the utility and the stair within this space, have a glazed link, and then one large open plan ground floor space which opened out into the garden.
I mean, I think really one of the things that was key was this idea came about. You may have said this while I was on the phone there, but this idea came about when we walked the site, and you have to actually go to site to actually sometimes get the idea, because it all becomes much more apparent when you're actually there. And that diagram was sketched out on site and then followed through from the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the understanding of the place, luckily on a site visit like this, we had a bit of time to soak up the place, to explore all of the corners of the island, to photograph buildings and talk about stone walls and junctions and planting and the relationship to paths and the beach. And it gave us a much richer understanding of the context, which was new to us in many ways.
It was a great site visit, really. I mean, not every site visit you get flown out to a remote island and stay in a 5-star hotel, but we don't expect that on every job, that's for sure. It was wonderful.
uh, yeah, this sketch really just illustrates what we were trying to do. This is the existing house, and then this is the I think much quieter and simpler building that we were ending up with. The clients were worried, and I think neighbours were too, that somebody from outside of the community who is moving to live here was going to take over this building and make a real sort of bling statement. But in our hands, that wasn't going to happen. We were going to really try and pick up on the character of the place and make sure that this building fitted in and in fact improved the environment that it was in rather than detracting from it.
There was a question came in there about what was it like to deal with the planning department, but I think it was also what's it like to deal with the Duchy of Cornwall. I think the King got involved in this, didn't he?
Yeah. Well, all of the land the land at the Scilly Isles is part of the Duchy of Cornwall, so all of the land is generally leasehold held. So although you have long-term leases on the land, you still have to let the owner of the land know when you're applying for planning permission. And in the case of the Isles of Scilly, they reserve quite a control over this. We had actually an interview with an architect from the Duchy of Cornwall who wanted to just check out who we are, came to visit us in our Glasgow office just to make sure I mean, it was quite an important project for this island, although it is only a house. It is a historic building and very important development for the island of its heritage. So yeah, there was quite a long process to go through with the Duchy before we really had permission to apply for planning permission, and then that was a lengthy process in itself, despite the subtle nature of the project. This shows the existing construction, and then how it was to be, the existing building was to be cleaned up, and the new large extension sitting down in the garden ground. And then that idea that we talked about, that diagram, is followed through, stepping down the hill to the beach. The stone building, the glazed extension, the glazed link, the timber extension, the other outbuildings, which also had small timber extensions added to them, and the stonework restored, and then a new workshop. One of the members of the family is an artist, and that boathouse down at the bottom, facing onto the beach, was rebuilt on the same footprint, in the same timber-clad form, pitched roof form, and as a small workshop. This is the plan, which really just expresses the cellular accommodation in here. You have an entrance from the street, so it's quite private. You do see right through the building, but the living spaces relate directly to the garden, and the utility at the front door, a stair with a top-lit rear wall, light washing down that wall, with the piano on the ground floor, and then a small bedroom suite at the other end. And then upstairs, 3 windows, also in the rhythm of the windows on the ground floor, which look out over the top of the timber extension. This is really the master suite spread out across a whole floor here. As you can see, that is the continuation of that very simple first day sketch followed through. But it was quite a story to build on an island like Briar. It doesn't have a substantial pier where you can land materials, so everything was delivered to site by landing craft onto the beach. The contractor, who can be seen here, used a tractor to take everything over to the site and had a rake with him all the time where he could rake the sand back to get rid of the tire tracks that you see here. Everything came in, all the windows, everything came in, and it was very carefully treated. We had to use a storage area on Penzance and bring everything in just as it was required, so as not to clutter up the site, and also, just manage that single path that runs around the island very carefully. And the first phase that was completed was the studio down at the boathouse, which is now a hive of activity. The artist has a sideline as well as her own work. She also makes signs for all of the different businesses on Briar and Tresco and all of the Scilly Isles. So she has hand-painted signs. It's a really fantastic place, and she can sell out to passing tourists on the walk along the beach. And then what came later was the demolition of sections of the house. Once we got into the nitty-gritty, this gable actually had to come down. The stone had to be cleaned and put back up again. It had no foundation. So we took that down. We reused all of the granite here, and from one other outbuilding on the island that had collapsed, we rebuilt this gable. And this is an image of that long wall facing onto the street and the new slate roof, bellaball slate, a Cornish slate was specified. And then this shows just the frame for the sliding screens, which are now clad in timber. This is the extension facing out onto the garden shortly before completion. This is the last visit we had, which is the new stair going up through the light filled heart of the building. So those two strong ideas of wanting to find this building and keep it as a historic, have a very strong historic connection to the street edge, we've achieved on this side, and then that very simple diagram is followed through to the junction of roads at the entrance. And so this building is just about to be photographed. It was completed last year, and we've been waiting till summer to get it photographed. The garden will now be fully established, so we're looking forward to seeing exactly how it's bedded in over time. And we have another one related to gardens and walls.
Yes, I think what we should have made walls the theme of this
Yes.
webinar. Really. Now that I think about it, it's all been about walls, but there you are, subliminal somehow. So yeah, this is a place called Kingsbarns in Fife, and if people know the East Neuk of Fife, I mean, it's just a beautiful place. It's like a hidden gem of Scotland, because actually it's not that well connected with roads compared to other parts of Scotland. So, well, I mean, better in the Highlands, I suppose. But it's a beautiful place, and they've done very well to really preserve the quality of their villages. And so you have to be really sensitive in how you approach any architecture in these conservation villages, because you have a responsibility, a real responsibility, not to do anything that's going to make them worse. You'll have a lot of eyes on you as well, so you have to be very careful. So this is Kingsbarns, not that far from St Andrews, a beautiful wee village with, at the heart of it is a church and a small hotel, a pub. So there's our site. So our site, the clients approached us. They'd actually had another design done by another architect beforehand. They got planning, but they came to us. They wanted a fresh approach, and you do have to look at things from a fresh and not just go with what other people do. So again, the site visit, I went with Sophie, who's the director of our Glasgow office. And the first thing you notice about the site is, this was a walled garden, and all the evidence that it was a very productive garden. And but it had just fallen into disrepair. But the features of it are these stone walls, these gables. You've got chimney pots, you've got church spires. It's very, very intense. And again, there is that feeling. So when you go through there, so that is from the rear before you when you're in there's an orchard at the back, and then you go through that door, and in there is the garden that was. So if you want to point out where the walled garden is, really, so that's a bit down at the bottom. And yeah, so there's these strong walls, and the instinct is how do you build while preserving these walls and preserving the integrity of what's there. Now, you'll see on the right-hand side where all the circles are, that's actually an orchard of, and there's over 100, apparently there's over 100 different types of apple varieties planted there. Again, our landscape architect did a bit, we got on board fairly early on to do some research into it, and there's a guy called James Cobb, who was a zoologist, who this became his garden, and he collected apple varieties, and it was a very productive fruit and veg garden, both the gardens. And so the instinct was, well, let's try and trying to an extent keep the integrity of what's there and try and be really careful about how you place a house and a garage, which is what the clients wanted, onto site, really think it through. And it was when we were on site, on the way back, we started sketching a diagram as to, well, we think this is how it could work. So I think the next image, Rudy, does that show, yeah, so this was I thought I'd just show you this just as a contrast to the previous architect. And there's nothing wrong with this approach, but it's not the approach we would have taken. So what they've done was where there was the wall, Rudy, if you can just show where the wall has been obliterated, which is in the courtyard garden, is across there. So they've taken that wall down, and our instinct was, well, that wall is very, very important because it defined a really clear space. And also they've eaten away a lot of the existing orchards, so it's become much smaller, and they've created lots of little separate gardens. I think there were 7 names to the gardens in here rather than it just being 2, which was it was 2 gardens plus an entranceway, what was there before. And so they had a strong idea about creating different gardens. Our instinct, and again, quite often it's instinctive, but how you respond to a site, our instinct was keep as much of the orchard as possible, build on the perimeter. So you keep the integrity of the original courtyard garden at the front. So you put your building up against it, but not within it. And then you create a third space, which is your entranceway, which is almost like another garden itself. So there's 3, but you're preserving the courtyard, which is the sort of the beautiful courtyard garden. You're not touching it, you're just restoring it. You keep the orchard as far as possible, create intimate views of which is a very, very different feel to the orchard, and also do something new within the entrance. And it was a very clear diagram, and an L-shaped building in that position was kind of our initial sketch. That was our thought. This is the way to approach this. And so there's a more detailed layout. And so you can see you've got the layout of the buildings, you've got the garage, you're creating an entrance courtyard, an entranceway, an entrance garden. You've got as many of the apple varieties preserved as possible. There'll have to be a full audit done of them, I'm sure. And then there's a new garden. It's kind of you're restoring the garden, but doing something new with it. And Harris Bugg, again, the landscape architects, for them, this was a wonderful project because, in fact, I think it was Charlotte's favourite project because there was so much there to work with because you're bringing something back to life. You've been really respectful to the work that's been done there before by James Cobb, but you're creating something new in what is actually a very, very dry environment. So actually how you plant it, how you minimise irrigation, how you make sure it looks beautiful all year round, and the clients can make full use of all the nooks and crannies of the garden is a really interesting project to develop. So this shows the garden layout, about retaining and rejuvenating the orchard, about developing the climate resistance courtyard, and about creating a lovely entranceway. So it's 3 distinctive spaces, as well as just the driveway approach. And again, the thought we had is like, how do you create this sense of drama? So as you approach into what's courtyard gardens, as it's called, number 2, you've no idea, you don't really have any idea about the about the orchard beyond. It's been closed off by this sort of bedroom wing, but there's a tantalising glimpse through. There's a glazed entranceway, and so you get a glimpse through of the orchard behind. But you don't see what's called here the meadow garden. It's been blocked off by the stone wall. So the stone wall is still intact, but it becomes part of the front elevation of the main section of the building. So I think the next image, yeah, just shows a general plan. So if you can see the entrance is kind of concealed, but so if you go back, the entrance is kind of concealed, but you look through that glass corridor to the orchard garden, so you get a glimpse of it. And as you come up, as you leave your dining space to go and see who's at your front door, you can see them sort of patiently waiting for you. The walled courtyard, the building has been, so the living area and the master bedroom suite has been built into the existing wall. That's been sort of taken down and rebuilt as part of the wall. So it's trying to retain as much of the walls that are there as possible, because it's the walls that make this place special, and you're working with them to try and create something that is respectful but beautiful, and create lovely spaces. And also the materials. So when you go on site, when you're building in a village, the context is very different to building a field where in a crofting township, where quite often you're responding to landforms, to hillsides, to old, walls and the landscape, as we've shown. But here you've got so much else to respond to, because you've got these beautiful pantiles of the East Coast. You've got the lovely stonework and the sandstone. You've got the castellated gables. You've got these chimney stacks. And I think all of this you want to respond to and be respectful to. So when you're choosing your materials and your colours, your forms, you don't want to do something that's going to jar. And it doesn't mean to say you can't do contemporary architecture, but I think it's just like trying to do something that is contemporary, but is also has a connection to the past. And I think what Dualchas has always been about is trying to find that continuity of story, to pick up that thread of the past and keep going with it. And I think in any building that has a story that feels it's got a connection to a place, future generations are more likely to cherish it, to respect it, to look after it, rather than demolish it. And one of the great crimes of what we've done over the last number of years in Scotland is build stuff that then has to be demolished. I mean, there's no greater example than some of the motorways built in.
Have we temporarily lost Neil there? It's not just me.
No, it looks like we've finally. Oh, he might be back. Neil, are you there?
I think he was just going to finish up on this project. And Neil, are you there?
I was, yeah. So I was just going to finish up on this project.
Yes.
I mean, I was making a huge statement there about cherishing the past,
Yeah.
but
We were all
maybe
waiting
it wasn't
with
recorded.
bated breath.
I'll never be able to say it so eloquently again.
Your
Something
signal's
that is
breaking up a bit. Yeah.
okay. Well, I'll maybe just let you finish this off, Rudy, this section.
Yeah. Yeah, no, this is a view into that courtyard garden. That we have a trellis which blurs the edge of the building. It faces directly south. It opens out into the garden, and we have a winter garden in here. So instead of a separate structure, we've managed to incorporate that into the a louvered trellis, which blurs the edge of the building and the stone wall.
That's not the actual garden proposal. That was just a render that you'll see for the building. You'll see that's just some grass. You'll see the garden in a minute.
Yeah. Yeah, and so to finish off on this, we have a fly through.
I think you've got another image of the Harrisburg image. Do you?
No, we don't.
Oh no,
we don't.
Okay.
No,
right.
We only have this one, but we do have it within the short fly-through film.
Okay.
So I'll put that on now as a way to just finish the talk off. Okay. So this is a film created by our Glasgow office, which is very rich in material, and it also shows really the flow of the building and the connection to the garden outside. You can see the new tree planting and the paths that wind their way through the courtyard garden there. And that each room has a relationship to the outside in different ways and to different gardens. So this moves down towards the master bedroom area and the bath, which has a private view into the garden. And also a connection directly out into the orchard.
There's a cat.
So this is a collaboration of Harrisburg and Dualchas. But a very simple internal material palette, not to distract from the exterior, which is really the star of the show, and our two new buildings just fitting carefully into it to create the new spaces. Okay.
Great. Thank you, guys. Wonderful.
Okay.
We've got one question in, and it's about concept designs and where we draw inspiration from. So when you're starting a project, are your concepts largely drawn from a perspective of being Hebridean and a close relationship with the landscape? Where is it you look for inspiration as soon as you get a new client? What are you looking at?
Well, I mean, can you hear? I'm not breaking up, am I?
No, you're
fine again.
Okay. No, I think it is really all about context. I mean, we started in the Hebrides, and we were inspired by the Black House, which is a very contextual building. And what we found in the Highlands was people had forgotten about the Black House. It was seen as a symbol of shame, backwardness, and people had forgotten its how responsive it was, not just to basically the fact people were poor, but the fact that people were responding to the climate, east to west, the house that's best. So it's a very contextual building, using materials at hand. And anywhere you go, I think context is important. So learning to respond to context, whether it's the Scilly Isles, whether it's in the Hebrides, whether it's in Fife, is the most important thing, to be responsive. And I think architects that just have a style, and then they put that style in any concept. It's their recognisable style, no matter where they build. I don't think that's responsive architecture. I think you respond to the place and be sensitive, and that's why planners like this, because what planners are looking for is for people to do something that isn't going to make a place worse, to actually be respectful, to care for a place. And I think if we all did that, and the onus is on clients and politicians, it's not just down to architects, because we don't commission the buildings unless it's our own house generally. People have to care about their environments, care about the placemaking, care about the future, as well as caring about the past. What are you actually doing? Because everybody either has to enjoy or suffer a building when it's built. It's for everybody, not just for the person that's paying for it. So context is key, and that's what we're taught at architecture school at the Mac, and I hope we all try and carry that through. Rudy, do you have the same view, or is it a bit different? You went to Aberdeen, didn't you?
Yes, yeah, no, I imagine it's the same view. But yeah, giving yourself time to immerse yourself in a place and the context. I mean, as soon as we hear about a project or are approached about something, we do as much research as we can instantly. We get excited about a place. So when we're going there, we're looking for things. We're looking for stories, and we're looking for materials, and we're looking for forms, and how a place works, what's the grain, and deciding when to work with it and against it, to make something interesting or something that interrupts it. So yeah, it's all about context for us, and it is just having learnt so much within our own context, on our own houses, in our own landscape, in our own communities. We are also keen to apply our knowledge and our approach to other landscapes, and try and get just as rich an output in those places.
Yeah, I mean, it applies to sort of cityscapes as well. I mean, it's you want to be responsive. I think architecture is that it's most enjoyable when it's a collaboration. So we don't do stuff for clients. We do stuff we do projects with clients. It's a collaboration, and there's an element of storytelling in it. So I think if you've got a story behind your building that you can tell, because every building costs a lot of money, and no matter what the design is, but if you can have a responsive building that works really well, that's sustainable, it's got a lovely, like this building has got a lovely internal environment. It's cool inside today, even though it's hot outside, because it's been thought about how you attenuate heat. But if you've actually got a story behind it, like you can tell a story about how your building was developed, it's a really enjoyable process. And I think as long as you've got a good architect, a budget that's realistic for your brief, and a good contractor, it should be a really enjoyable process. I mean, things get stressful when things come in too expensive, or the contractor makes mistakes, or it takes too long. So if you have a good team and you set off realistically, it should be a really, really enjoyable process, but also you're doing something for everybody. Let's say that when we're building in Scotland, we're seeing this as part of Scotland's culture that we're building. It's not just a house for somebody. And I think that's a good way to look at it. See yourself as somebody who's trying to build something that's part of whatever community that you're in, and enjoy doing it.
Great. Thank you, guys. We have run on. Are you both okay for time for another couple of minutes so we can take a few more questions, and then we can wrap up at say 10 past
okay,
2. So we'll give it a few
Yeah.
more minutes. What's your top tip for finding a site?
Patience, maybe.
Patience. Yeah, get to know the local crofters. It's difficult because when I first started, myself and my twin first started off, you would go to you'd knock on a crofter's door and say, look, if we get planning consent for you, will you sell this and this person pays for it? Will you sell them this bit of land? And they, oh, aye, that's fine. But it's more difficult now, and you have to keep your ears to the ground, and you have to be maybe willing just to brass neck it and go and speak to somebody. But it's difficult. But I think it's like trying to keep your ear to the ground and go to understand where you want to build and get to know folk and maybe talk to folk, because otherwise all you're doing is you're just looking on the estate agents, and you're just competing with everybody else. I mean, there's not much else you can do.
And there is no perfect site. You may imagine there's a perfect site, but you have to compromise. Every site is different. I think sometimes a way to find a good site is just to approach it imaginatively. You may have the Ord site, for instance. It was an entirely enclosed steading, but if you could get up to the right elevation, there's incredible views from that site. But it had to be approached very creatively and carefully to maintain the existing building and the character of the place.
Okay, we'll take one more question, then we'll wrap up, guys. Storage, is it cleverly hidden behind doors? One question's come in saying they couldn't notice any storage in the drawings and the design.
Well, there is storage. I mean, I'm not sure what plans in my own house there is storage, but I think you can always do with. We've got a very large shed outside where we keep stuff, because you always need more storage, particularly when you've got kids. But yeah, I mean, the thing is, you design to folks' brief. So if somebody's brief is that you want lots of storage, you design in lots of storage.
Yeah.
The Hep Homes houses that we've done, there's lots of storage in the Hep Homes houses, because we know like people are always fill your cup.
Yeah, I mean, it is something that we I suppose integrate into the design, so it's not obvious. It's not always obvious from in a room that a wall has been thickened out to take it. The rooms often have a very simple format. There's no nicks taken out of them. They are very simple rooms. So we have cabinetry items which form a lot of storage between rooms. We have thickened walls and lots of cases which enclose a lot of storage. In the house that I'm in just now, we've got a 27-meter long house, but along the spine of it, we have at least 15 meters of storage as part of that. And some of it becomes a recess for windows. Some of it becomes a window seat. Some of it is the kitchen built in. Some of it's bookcases. Some of it. So there's lots of ways to integrate storage to separate buildings out, but not so it doesn't dominate.
Yeah, that's great. Right, guys, we'll wrap up there. Thank you very much, Neil and Rory. That was really inspirational. It was great to see those projects, some wonderful designs there, and you can see the beautiful craft that goes into each design. So hopefully everyone else has found that really insightful and inspiring as well. Just seeing the whole process for these projects from concept to completion. If you are considering your own projects and you'd like to continue the conversation in a bit more depth, then we'd be delighted to hear from you. So feel free to send through any initial information you have on a project or site or any ideas to info@dualchas.com. I'll drop that in the chat as well, so you have the email address. And we can arrange a bit more in-depth conversation to see how Dualchas might be able to help. And you can also see lots of examples of work on the website as well. So thank you all for your time today. Thank you again, Rory and Neil, and hopefully we'll get to speak to some of you in a bit more detail in future. And have a good afternoon, everyone.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Fraser. Bye,
Everyone.
bye.
Cheers. Bye.